Hi, I'm Trevor Greenfield, publisher of Moon Books, and with your forbearance, I thought I'd jump onto the launch event of Luke's latest book. When I saw the initial inquiry for the Druid Garden, I thought, well, yeah, bit of Druidry, bit of history, bit of gardening, that should appeal. But when the full proposal and the draft text came through, I quickly realised that it was much, much more than just that. Because the Druid Garden is Druidry and history and gardening, but it's also a book that, through its engagement with the past, allows us to re-envision a brighter and more sustainable way of life. Whilst offering the reader a reconstructed historical framework, the Druid Garden presents us with a roadmap towards a better tomorrow, introducing to us, as it does, organic gardening, permaculture, and biodynamics. As the book title says, this is gardening for a better future inspired by the ancients. But hey, I'm the publisher. I would say that, wouldn't I? Well, maybe. But it's not just me saying it. Luke's book has an impressive list of endorsers. Here's a couple. Matthias Wagner, for example, says, Luke Eastwood has gathered an essential wisdom and knowledge required specifically to assist all those, the new generation of gardeners, who wish to learn more about the art of growing trees and plants by tapping into the timeless wisdom and knowledge of our magical past. And no less a luminary than Philip Cargom has observed, this engaging and informative book is a must for both the seasoned gardener and the curious beginner, keen to embrace both the sustainable and the sacred in their gardens. So, The Druid Garden by Luke Eastwood ticks all the boxes. Druidry, tick. History, tick. Gardening, tick. But I'm going to add another category because it ticks that box too. The Druid Garden by Luke Eastwood. Inspirational, tick. Go find a copy and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to my launch for my new book, which is called The Druid Garden, which is published by Moon Books and it's just come out last week. I think in the States it came out yesterday. Now, I had planned to do this as an actual physical event, but unfortunately, things being as they are with COVID, etc., it just hasn't been possible. But so just making the best of it, and fortunately it's a very beautiful day here in Dingle today, which is why I'm able to do this outside. It's absolutely roasting here. Well, for Dingle that would be what you call roasting, maybe not in some other countries. There's still a fair bit of wind though, but yeah, it's beautiful today. So anyway, first of all I'd like to thank Trevor Greenfield of Moon Books, who was very kind to introduce this and said some very nice things. So thank you to him for that, and also for really getting behind this book and agreeing to publish it, and also to get the timing right for it to come out now in springtime when people are actually starting to do gardening. So it didn't actually take much convincing to win him over in terms of the timing. It is above all a practical book, so this is the time when people are getting started. So anyway, I'd also like to thank Ellen Everett Hopman, who was very kind in writing the introduction to the book, and she's written many books. She's a Druid herself. I think one of the more recent ones is A Legacy of Druids, but this book came in very useful as well, as you can see. A Druid's Herbal for the Sacred Earth Year. So there's a lot of info in that, which I recommend if you want to know more specifically about herbalism. Another author who I've met and spent a bit of time with is Ellen Sentier, who very kindly gave me this book, Gardening with the Moon and Stars. She's also on Moon Books, and this is quite a small book, but you know, it's got lots of useful information. So that was, you know, quite helpful and inspiring. And another person would be Carol Gaye, who wrote this book. She lives up in County Clare, I think. And this is very much about the spiritual uses of plants. There's not really information about how to grow anything, but in terms of connecting with them on a spiritual level. That's not for everybody. Some people think that the whole concept is nuts. Personally, I do think they are sentient, not in the same way as we are, obviously, but on an also etheric level, you can communicate with plants, and they do have senses, they do have awareness. Not in the way that we have. They don't actually have a brain as such, but they do have a sort of rudimentary nervous system and an awareness, and they can communicate with each other, which is quite interesting. Secret Life in Plants is something that covers that to quite a large extent. So I wanted also to thank Elena Danan, who illustrated the book. Let's see if I can find a nice illustration for you. Oh yeah, here's one here. Planning the Garden, this one is. And she illustrated my last book too, called Kerry Folk Tales, which I wrote with Gary Brannigan. And she's also illustrating the next book, which will be out towards the end of the year. So thank you very much to her for that. And another person who lives in Dingle as well is Cyril Harrington, who did the cover shot, which was taken a few miles away from where I live in a little townland called Milltown. A big standing stone actually is in somebody's garden. So he took the cover shot, which is here. So thank you very much, Cyril. Now, there's quite a lot of things that I could say inspired this book. People I've met over years. You know, I suppose my first brush with gardening was as a kid. So, yeah, I suppose I wasn't mad into it really. I had to help out a bit in the garden, and I liked the idea of it as well. But practicalities when you're 6, 7 years old, you know, you're probably more interested in kicking a ball about and running off playing with your friends, which was the case with me. But later on I got into it when I was a student. And then much later on I met people who've been very inspirational. Particular people I met, Emma and David Farrell, who run Plant Consciousness and various other things under the Archetype Events sort of moniker. And, you know, they've been very kind to me. And, you know, through them I met other people who have a sort of a different perspective on plants, very much at the spiritual end. Whereas, you know, that would have been important to me, but I suppose my training as a horticulturist didn't include anything spiritual. It didn't include anything vaguely connected with Druidry or magic or anything like that. So these people I've met, also Carol Gaye, who I mentioned earlier, and my teacher Carl Dacus up in Dublin School of Horticulture. You know, they're kind of a lot of the inspiration behind this book, and particularly two sets of people. Eve Kay, who with her husband introduced biodynamics to Ireland. I used to do gardening work for her because she'd retired and she wasn't really physically able for that. So I used to do the work, and she used to lend me books, and we'd sit and chat about, gardening and spirituality and such. So I'd like to think some of her ideas rubbed off on me. And Bev Richardson and Del Richardson down in Cork, they very much live close to the land, and they grow their own stuff, the polytunnel, and they really have lived life actually close to the land for decades. It's not just talk. So they've been very inspirational to me in that sense. So I've kind of pulled together a lot of different things inspired by many different people, and that's what's led to this book. Now, some of the things in the book I've referenced, I'm going to show you. One of these is this massive book here called Botanica, which is a fantastic encyclopedia of plants. I bought this second hand, and I think I only paid about €5 for it, or something crazy. And I mean, it's very expensive, brand new, but if you're lucky, you're like me, you could pick up a second-hand copy somewhere. It's full of wonderful plants. It's all alphabetical, so there you go. Just a couple of pages there for you to look at. So it's got fantastic pictures as well as actual information about the plants. I really recommend buying that. So that was very useful for me in putting this book together. And another great book I'd recommend is Secrets from Yesterday's Gardeners. I've had this for years. It's actually full of brilliant stuff of old techniques that farmers from maybe 100 years or more ago would have used before we had modern agrochemicals and modern fertilizers and pesticides and all that stuff. So that's definitely worth a go. And finally, I trained up in Dublin doing the Royal Horticultural Society exams, and there's Encyclopedia of Gardening here, which tells you about different gardening techniques. Again, this is a second-hand copy which I managed to pick up for I think €10 in a second-hand shop. So you can buy it online. I think brand new it's a horrendous price, something like €60 or €70. But yeah, you can probably pick up a second-hand copy for half that or less. Or I was incredibly lucky to get that in a very cheap junk shop. So what I've basically done with this book is try to condense down my understanding of the Druid knowledge, a lot of which has come from Fergus Kelly's book on early farming in Ireland, and the Irish ethnobotany book as well, and more modern stuff like biodynamics, what I've learned with my horticulture course, and various people I've already mentioned, sort of tying together sort of actual practical knowledge of gardening with a more spiritual approach, which I think is actually really important, especially in the times that we're in now, where we're starting to see the effects of decades and decades of using pesticides has decimated the bird population, it's decimated the population of bees, so that now, we're really short on pollinators now because this has gone on for so long. You look back to when DDT came out, they were actually using it on children to sort of delouse children, and of course it's incredibly toxic, DDT, and it was banned. But now we still have a situation where there's lots of nasty pesticides which are still in use, which are it seems proven to be carcinogenic, but they haven't been banned yet, and that's really down to big corporate lobbying, who have a lot of sway with like governments, and they're fighting to keep their products on sale, even though they're fully aware that they are toxic, not just to humans but to the whole environment. And that's very much my thoughts are about getting away from that and getting techniques that aren't harmful. And the same applies a lot with compost. A lot of that is quite nastily produced. And again, with fertilizers, there's natural solutions to all these things. But, you know, if you make your own compost or you make your own fertilizers, where is the profit for these big corporations? There isn't any. So they don't want you doing that. They want you to buy their products and not actually manage yourself. You know, so it's a lot about thinking outside the box, really, and maybe trying to bring together sort of our spiritual practices of prayer and, you know, devotion to the earth, or whatever it may be. You don't necessarily have to be a Druid. You could be Christian or Buddhist or whatever, and take the ideas out of this book and employ them in the garden. But the end result will be a more spiritual approach to gardening and to looking after the planet and doing our bit to change things, to reintroduce wild areas, to reintroduce more species into your garden, into your locality. And the more you do this, the more you're actually benefiting and helping the environment. And, you know, as a result, we're helping humanity too. So, much as it, you know, you can selfishly say, oh, well, you know, I want to grow lots of nice organic food for myself and I'll save a ton of money. But at the same time, you're actually doing something altruistic by helping the earth. If you have a more holistic attitude towards the garden, towards your food, and generally sort of a more enlightened approach, I'd call it. So I mean, hopefully this is something that's going to really take off in the next few years, that people will get back to nature, back to the land, back to more organic and more naturalistic ways of doing things. It's certainly something that I think really needs to happen very badly. So anyway, I could blather on for hours, but I'm not going to. I'd just like to say, if you are interested, you know, my book is on sale now, and also those other books that I mentioned, you might find some of them interesting too. They're definitely worth looking into. So to end, I'm going to read you just a short bit from the book. One could read 100 or even 1,000 books on horticulture and gardening, but it isn't until you get your hands dirty that you really begin to understand what it is all about. Many things in life are like this. Descriptions, explanations, and analyses only get you so far, because you have to experience it for yourself to know what it is. This book is my attempt to impart knowledge that will help unite two disciplines that may appear to have little overlap. And these are Druidry and gardening. In my mind, they are complementary, and certainly from a Druid standpoint, part of the same body of knowledge. One doesn't need to be a Druid to appreciate gardening, or indeed to be a gardener to gain an interest and understanding in Druidry. However, I hope that I've managed to bring these two worlds closer together for you, the reader, in a way that is practical and useful. As I sit here writing these final words, the world is in lockdown. A terrible pandemic emerged from nature seemingly, and has gripped the human world in fear and panic, and thrown our fragile political and economic systems into chaos. I cannot help but feel that we are on the verge of something new, a new era of technocracy and totalitarian oppression. Or it could be a new age of tolerance, wisdom, and re-engagement with the natural world. As I write, it is not yet clear what will transpire, and there is much that is yet to be decided. Perhaps it will be possible for humanity to retain the best of our technological marvels for the good of all beings and for this wonderful planet. If you've got this far in this book, you probably are of the view that a holistic rather than a purely technological vision of the future would be better and a more benign option. One can only hope that all of us can care about this earth and all existence on it. And we can use what skills and time and energy we have to bring about the most favourable outcome. The future is in our hands, and it is being written now and in the coming months and years ahead. Then we must all play our part. Okay, well, hopefully this will make some difference. And each of us, we have the choice. You know, we can just get on with stuff, carry on watching the telly, or we can go out and really try and make a positive difference in the world. So, on that note, I'll end, and I just say thank you very much for watching, and I hope this has been interesting and enjoyable. And take care. Thank you.